Actually, here, I'll just talk about the Nasus thing first, since it's fresh on my mind. Okay. So, Nasus, what happens? DRX goes Ornn, Lucian, Maokai, right? So they go Ornn. I didn't tweet that I'm live. Do that. Lucian. Oh, my mouse is driving me nuts. Maokai. And then, what did Rogue go? Yuumi, Caitlyn, Sedge. I mean, Sedge should never be banned. That's just bad. Yuumi, and then Sedge. I also don't even think that Yuumi... I mean, especially when you're capable of playing Soraka. Okay, and then they open B1 Aatrox. DRX ends up responding Azir Kalista. I mean, I already think it's bad. I mean, I think this is just, it's just always a bad, I think it's always a bad line. P2, P3 is what? Ash Dinger. So, okay. So, without having to talk too much, about some stuff. So, okay. Already, I want to point out that the draft is already behind. They're already behind. Why? Because they have an Azir paired with a Kalista. They have two champions that do not necessarily want to be in the same game together. Not that they can't be in the same game together, but it's a very weird opening. Because now you have to pivot in one direction or the other. Either you have to concede why you picked Kalista and draft towards the Azir, or you have to concede what Azir is really best at and draft towards the Kalista. When you make Azir become like an engagey type of champion or like a standoffy type of champion that isn't like doing what he just excels at, you're fundamentally making him just worse in draft. So it is such a mismatched pairing on R1, R2 where you can't be absolutely certain about the value that either champion will actually get in the entirety of the draft. So I think that when this is happening, it's already bad. Now, over the course of the last few days, I've talked to a lot of people about Heimerdinger's support, and you know, obviously, I expect it will actually start popping up a lot more as Worlds does draw on. And I think there's a couple of answers to it, but I'm not sure how many people are capable of playing the answers, or some of them actually just require bot lane combinations, right? Which is like Seraphine Senna as a combo. Lux Seraphine would be another one that would be very good against Heimerdinger. Ezreal AD carry with like Ziggs support, I think would be another one, not Xerath. I think that I think it's actually important that it be Ziggs support and not Xerath, because I think the two actually do function a little bit differently, even though they're both mages. And I think outside of that, Heimer's oppressiveness, especially when he's paired with certain AD carries, I think it's actually high enough that he is just winning a mass majority of lines. And I think that that's where a lot of the problem stems from. So in the Rogue game, what ends up happening here is that they go Rumble on R3. Now, the interesting thing about Rumble is I think that Rumble is actually totally looked over in just League of Legends in general right now. If you guys go to Rumble's match history, right? So if we go to patch history, we go to Rumble, right? So we click Rumble, we go to his patch history. Okay, let's pull this open really quick. One of the things that you'll immediately notice is that Rumble hasn't really had anything happen to him. He was taken out of the jungle because Riot changed the interaction with his heat. And they did that because Rumble was so prevalent like last year, right? Rumble jungle, everyone remembers that. But when you consider the durability patch and some other stuff that has ended up happening to him, Rumble's actually just in a pretty good spot. Rumble is a lane bully in a lot of lanes. He just is, or he goes even in a lot of lanes. And the durability patch really made some champions that are capable of doing that a lot better. Aatrox was one of those champions, and Aatrox also has some love in the sense of like Eclipse and the way that he functions against a lot of other champions and whatnot. And so in that regard, Aatrox is pretty okay. But Rumble, I mean, it's weird that no one picks him as much as he could be getting picked. But one of the things that I do think that's odd is that when Rumble was really popular in top lane, Aatrox was considered one of his answers. So it's very bizarre to me that someone would actually willingly pick Rumble into Aatrox especially given Aatrox's current state. So when I initially see this in the draft, I imagine that this is support Rumble with Callista. But I think support Rumble versus Ashe and Heimerdinger is bad. So if it's not going to be support Rumble, then it's going to be top Rumble, which now means that we have AP top, we have AP mid. So we're already having a lot of problems because now we have to have an AD champion inside of the jungle and limits our options on support. So then after this, we go Victor Silas ban. But I think the Victor Silas ban is also just kind of weird. In that, you know, they're banning both. Now I do think that Victor probably does have to be banned, but the thing is that like Corki is still open. Now no one's picking Corki, but Corki's still open. The issue is that there's too many champions that are just good against Azir in this spot. You can't ban them all out, so they just ban those two. And then DRX ends up banning Rakan and Soraka. So the Rakan thing is really odd because when Heimerdinger was actually rising to prominence in the Korean solo queue ladder, he actually was coming out because Rakan was really popular and Heimerdinger support can actually just shit on Rakan. So that ban is a little bit odd. I think even the Soraka ban is actually odd because I just think that Heimer and Ashe can actually control things against Soraka really well, but maybe that's just because it's specifically against Trymbi. Jarvan ends up getting picked on R4, and I already feel like this is just the stupidest thing in the world because, again, why did we pick Azir if we're now going to just draft all these really hard engagey champions? There's so many other better champions that you could pick in mid-game that would just inherently be a lot better. So Jarvan gets picked here, and we're reserving counterpick on support, but already the draft is fucking doomed. You have a Jarvan inside of the jungle running into champions that like to be jumped on, with the one exception being Ashe. Aatrox and Heimerdinger, their wet dream is trying to be engaged on. So this is just a really weird, bad draft by Rogue at this point that doesn't really have any clear-cut way of doing anything. Like, what is the identity of this draft? I mean, I guess it shreds neutrals really fast, right? Really, really, really fast Baron capture, really fast, like, 3rd, 4th, 5th Drake capture, Elder, right? But outside of that, what the fuck is the identity? The enemy team now goes Akali and Vi. So, I mean, I think both of these picks are also pretty dog water. I actually don't understand the Akali or the Vi. I mean, it's DRX, so it's whatever. So I feel like this is actually kind of a fumble inside of the draft, but it doesn't really matter because Rogue is just so far behind. Now, the issue here is that, again, Heimer is really susceptible to basically mage supports. So you're looking at like Ziggs. You're looking at Seraphine, who's an enchanter, but also functions sort of as a mage. You're looking at like Senna, which is an AD caster. So, I mean, you could almost kind of call Senna a mage. You're looking at like Xerath and these things. Now, of all of those, I think that Ziggs is probably the best. Because especially considering that it's paired with Callista, right? The issue is that if you go Ziggs on R5 here, for Ziggs support, again, you have a Callista, but then you have a Rumble and you have an Azir. So it's so much magic, and your Jarvan is also probably going to go like Sunfire, or he's not going to go full AD Jarvan or something like that. So resistances are just going to be way too problematic. Vi is never dying, Aatrox is never dying, etc. So the situation is really, really, really fucked for Trymbi on R5. There's basically no physical damage supports that he can actually pick here that would do anything. I genuinely don't know what he could do. Now, we saw in one of the other games, someone tried to take Syndra. Syndra herself is not really a response because she can only use her W every so many seconds, and you're only throwing one of the turrets away and whatnot. So, well, that might make a little bit sense. Again, it still falls into the problem of it's like actually a mage. Other things could be like Brand or something like that, but I think that, again, Ziggs is just way better. So realistically, in this game, with the way the draft is right now, I think Trymbi has to just go Senna. He doesn't find it there. Now, I reached out to Trymbi, I talked to Trymbi, and he actually said all of this stuff. That he felt like the draft was really doomed, and that let me jog my memory with the conversation. He acknowledged that it's a really bad spot for AP damage, and so picking a mage is sort of like not in his mind. And then I reminded him that Nasus's damage is actually primarily magic, because it's all coming from his E and his R. So Even Nasus is actually a magic champion. But he told me that out of all the champions that he could pick on R5 that fulfill that role of like being a mage and doing stuff, he felt the most practiced and comfortable on Nasus, and so that's why he picked Nasus on R5, because you need a champion that has long range, which Nasus has in the form of a Z, and you need a champion that can offer some sort of a poke back. There's not a whole no. I don't think this is I don't think this is at all because we're talking about very obvious things. Rumble pick is really bad. Rumble pick's really bad, and I mean best in slot support here I think is Ziggs. But the problem is that they have a Zir and they have Rumble. They have a Zir Rumble. No, MF doesn't do enough, so she can't actually go support against Heimer's turrets. MF doesn't do enough. MF would have to be able to do something. It sucks. It really sucks. It really sucks. No, Lux by herself is not good. So I think that in general, for people, let me duplicate tab. I think in general, if opponents have something like Ashe Heimer, I think that like the bot lane answers that you're looking for are probably like Ezreal Ziggs. I think this is a really good bot lane answer. I think another really good bot lane answer against this is Lux Seraphine. Lux Seraphine also completely fist Caitlyn. And so I think Lux Seraphine and Ezreal Ziggs could end up being, well, I mean, they're not going to end. Let me just set the record straight really quick. Neither of these two bot lanes will be picked by pro players because that would be asking too much. But I think that these two bot lanes are the best against what I think is going to be or end up becoming the most popular type of bot lane, which is the Ashe Heimerdinger and Caitlyn X. So let's just get that out of the way. That Ezreal Ziggs and Seraphine Lux are both winning versus Ashe Dinger and Caitlyn X. So these are all losing. Now Lucian Nami, I think Lux Seraphine does beat Lucian Nami. And then Ezreal Ziggs does massively outscale Lucian Nami. So I mean that's definitely something that you could consider. But yeah, I mean it's a little rough, yeah. It's a little rough. So I mean I think stuff like this is fine. I think stuff like this is fine. All right. Anyways, so the really weird thing about the whole Nasus thing is I began getting attacked for Nasus, right? So basically if you go on YouTube, okay, and you search LS Nasus, and you go here, you'll notice in the very, very beginning, at 7 minutes and 56 seconds in the video where I talk about Nasus support, it has a timestamp for Nasus's weaknesses. Now, I wish that I could play this for you guys, but I don't totally know how me and Joe actually coordinate the audio. But literally, how do I coordinate this, actually, Joe? Okay. Already do have currently locked in multiple physical damage champions so that you're able to make use of his Spirit Fire total value inside of team fights, or make sure that the opponents have lots of champions that are able to actually be affected by the cripple and the slow on Wither. Difficult matchups for Nasus. I do think that certain ADCs can be rough for him, notably would be Ezreal and Xayah. Ezreal is playable against, but Xayah in the hands of a good player should be pretty difficult for Nasus to actually do anything to, at least in laning. Obviously, Nasus is weak to long-range poke and harass. He's also really weak to an abundance of enchanters, because then... Wow, Nasus is weak to long-range poke. Nice. Be able to add any value to the team. Other things are going to basically be non-traditional things. You're not going to be able to do anything against mages or enchanters. Wow, not good against mages. Wow, I wonder what Heimer is. If they have enchanters or mages on the support, it is going to be bit of a knife fight that is left up to mostly the marksman matchup. Enchantress supports that are able to actually heal through Nasus's poke is a bit of a problem. So mostly I'm referring to Nami and I'm referring to Soraka. Yumi isn't as bad. Oh my lord! All right, so that's it on the Nasus. I think this reacts to the Nasus stuff fairly well. I think that this reacts to the Nasus stuff. I don't think there's any I don't think there's any other issues. Yeah, Senna's support was probably the best support that he could actually go for in this particular game. But it doesn't really matter because the whole draft is already just a disaster from the get-go. I mean, it all starts with Rumble. It all starts with Rumble on R3. Well, it doesn't start with Rumble on R3. I think Rumble on R3 is the point of no return. It starts with R1, R2, Kalista Azir. Just two champions that don't belong. You know, getting picked together. So I mean, it's pretty much whatever. I mean, I think this is just a good punish. Now, I mean, they could still play out of it on R3 without Rumble, and they could maybe still manage to win the draft if DRX blunders B4 B5. But yeah, okay.